And we're back, and you're listening to Dr. Rob, Spirits and Supernatural. This is Patrick of Backwoods Tech, and I'm here with Dr. Rob. And we're getting ready to have Jerry Orbach, who is a known actor, probably most recently known for his portrayal of a detective on Law and Order and several other spin-off series, who died just a few years back, actually in December of 2004. And we have a few questions for him. And Dr. Rob, is Jerry Orbach with us?
Yes, he is, Patrick. I can feel him here in the room with us. Very gentle-spoken. Just really impressed with his attitude and with the way he presents himself. He's just really a soft guy compared to what he portrayed on the movies and TV. He's a much different personality for sure.
So we won't see Detective Briscoe roughing us up or anything during this interview, huh?
I don't think so. I think that he was a very gentle soul when he was alive, and I think that's one of the things that he wants me to present this evening, of his gentleness and his soft-spokenness. It just seems to almost whisper to me instead of speaking in a regular voice, and I think that's just to show me the contradictions of what I would perceive him to be, from seeing him only on film and TV. He just presents himself in such a well-spoken manner. It's just amazing the way that I'm feeling right now.
Wow, well, he had been in acting for a long time, and it's ironic as he was, on the Law and Order series so long that, you pretty much, that's all you thought of him in. And ironically, remember after the Patrick Swayze interview, how Patrick Swayze had kind of joked basically that, he would like to be known for more than just being on Roadhouse. I kind of took that to heart, because that was about the only main movie of his I remembered. So I went back and watched a few of them, and ironically, I had seen Jerry Orbach popping up in some of my other research on other stars more than once. And I went back and watched Dirty Dancing, and then there was Jerry Orbach in there, only he played the doctor of Jennifer Grey, basically Jennifer Grey's father in that. And I thought, well, this is probably a connection. He is trying to come through. So I thought that was pretty interesting.
Yeah, I did as well, and I'd almost forgotten that he played the doctor, the father figure in that film. I've seen Dirty Dancing 100 times, and I guess that just totally slipped my mind. He didn't look like he did later in Law and Order, and so I guess I just kind of thought like Jennifer Grey. She had that nose job, and it kind of just changed her personality and appearance. Well, not really personality, but just appearance. And I think I just focused on that when I was thinking about Jerry Orbach.
Yeah, I was surprised too. I mean, for Law and Order, he was more of the beefy, kind of rugged cop type. And, he did a great job of portraying a doctor in Dirty Dancing, and he fit the profile of pretty much your mid-'80s successful doctor. So it was wild, some of the other portrayals. Looks like he had a pretty extensive career. Now, it sounds like he is pretty well adjusted on the other side by now.
I would say yes. I would say since the passing of his wife, he's pretty much at peace. When he was gone on the other side and she was still here, it was a lot of work for him to keep her going. And now that she's with him on the other side, it kind of gives that sense of reuniting of two spirits. He felt like they were true soulmates when he was alive, and she missed him terribly, and he says that's one of the contributing factors to her passing, was just kind of giving up on life. And it was sad for him to see her on the other side, from the other side, and the things that she was going through, and him not being able to be there for her. It was very frustrating. It was almost like hell for him.
Yeah, it is tragic. We've heard that with a few cases where people pretty much were with their soulmate, and until their passing, I guess it is pretty much like a big separation. I guess it would be kind of like a state of purgatory or hell in a way.
Absolutely, and I think that for what I'm seeing here, this is kind of reuniting of two souls and forming one soul, and they never leave each other's side. Now that they're on the other side together, they kind of just are always together. In fact, he's here by himself for this interview, and he said that's not going to be for very long. He said that she'll be waiting for him on the other side, waiting for him to come back to her. And so I think that's a real true love story. In Hollywood, things are not always as they appear, and to have that couple being so close together just gives me great hope for other couples in Hollywood as well.
It is refreshing, especially after a lot of the headlines you read anymore. I mean, it's nice to see that still does happen. Now, he did, battle prostate cancer for many years. What kind of treatments did he resort to extend his life? Because, I think he overall did pretty well with it for, having something that's usually can be terminal.
He said he tried to follow modern medicine, but it was really just his focus on living, and staying busy and working. He said that's what really kept him going was his work, not wanting to disappoint the fans, not wanting to disappoint the people. And he said there was many days that he was, so deathly ill that he could barely do his part. But he said that for him, that was his will to live, and when he finally, passed to the other side, he was, relieved out of exhaustion more than anything else, because he said that, for him, he was always working, and it just kept him focused on his work, and he really made him feel better, as a person. So I think that really for him, that was just kind of just that giving up the ghost, let's say, it was just like expending all that energy was just necessary in order for him to pass. But he says he really completed everything that he set out to do, and with his series of Law and Order, he said he was surprised that he lasted as long as he did. He knew for many years that he was sick and still fighting it, but he said his spirituality kept him going. That was really focusing on the people and focusing on the good that he was doing. It just kept him going.
Well, it is encouraging. I think a lot of it is really about a positive attitude with anything. Now, he went into the entertainment business, but had he ever really considered, being in law enforcement or a police officer at any point?
Actually, he says no. He was going to leave it up to the professionals. He loved playing the part. It was great for him to, have that opportunity. But for him, dealing with the stresses every day and risking his life, he felt like that they were the heroes of society. He played one, and he felt very privileged and honored to actually have that opportunity. But for him personally, that wasn't something he was really interested in. He said a lot of the times when he was, preparing for his role, it was difficult for him because he needed to, get some technical terms and, really get the attitude. And he said he really kind of based his character on the 1950s, some of the old films, the 50s and 60s, where cops portrayed themselves as being the hard guy, and he said he just tried to play it, even, just good guy, bad guy, whatever the role called for.
I'd say hit it down pretty good, because I always love that show. I still watch it. In fact, I need to probably catch up on some of the new spin-off series. Sounds like really his work was what he really enjoyed most about being a star, but was there anything else that he really, fondly remembers about it?
He says that he loved it when people would stop him on the street and tell him how great a job he was doing and how much they enjoyed his work. He said that was more rewarding than anything else to hear from the people. He said that he tried to walk sometimes through the streets just so that people would recognize him. He said it wasn't really out of pride. It was more out of just, getting to know the people. He said he loved it when people asked for autographs and when they would just, take his picture, and that was just kind of really thrilling for him to know that he touched that many lives.
Yeah, I believe at one point he was even declared kind of a living landmark for New York City.
He said he loved Greenwich Village. That was a good place for him to walk. Gramercy Park and some of the other places there in New York were just, his favorite place to be. He said he could have lived anywhere, and he just chose New York as his hometown, and he just pretty much embraced the culture and, the food. He said the food. It was just something that he just really enjoyed. He said he'd spend some time on Times Square and some of the other landmark places, and people would just be so surprised that he'd just be walking on the street, and they would just, hey, Jerry, and it was kind of, just being at home, and he enjoyed that the most.
Well, would he say that probably the Law and Order series, Law and Order series was probably his favorite, long-term project he worked on, or was there some other movies maybe he considered, most enjoyable also?
He said that really was kind of like himself, that was the role that was closest to him, as far as his TV roles. He talks about some of the earlier films not being what he wanted, and he kind of just had to do them because he was under contract, and so it wasn't really that enjoyable. The people he was not close to them. They didn't become lifelong friends. But he said, from what he was doing at the end of his life, he felt like he was really satisfied, and all the sacrifices that he had made over the years, it kind of gave him that sense of satisfaction.
Well, that's cool. Now, who was his favorite star probably to work with?
Actually, he says that, the cast of Law & Order was really his life. They were his family, and he felt very close to all of them. And, for him personally, he says that if he would have named one, that he would insult the other. So for him, that was just kind of just like, that was his family. That was where it was at for him.
Yeah, and, that usually kind of came through on that show, too. I mean, you could really see that there was a sense of togetherness with the whole cast. I mean, I think that's probably why it's done as well as it has for so long.
He said it was really true to life. I mean, some of the storylines he said said were just taken right out of the headlines, and of course, artistic licensing added to it. But he said that he really enjoyed, fighting some of the cases, even though it was by proxy, and getting justice for some of the cases that he knew that there would be no justice. And so it was satisfying too. He said also they were never given the scripts ahead of time. They were kind of just given their part, and they just did their part. And he would sometimes watch the episodes and go, "Oh, so that's what happened," And he said that was kind of enjoyable for him. He didn't really like watching himself, but he liked watching everybody else. And he said that being cut up the way it was, sometimes he'd film one day, and then that would be the end of the show or the middle of the show, and then they would film all the rest in between. And he said, it was just different location shoots for him, and so it was really hard, to know what the storyline was really about. He said they were really protective of the storylines. They said that they were, didn't want to get to be leaked out, so they would just give him just a few pages, and the other people would get a few pages, and nobody had the complete. And he said that was frustrating sometimes to know where he fit in it, but it was hard. He said very hard to do that role.
I can imagine. Sometimes I get antsy enough knowing, that it's going to end in an hour. If it took days or so to find out, it would kind of really get to you. But it probably did add to some of the shock value. You could see the genuineness of some of their shock value. I guess that helped with that also.
Absolutely. They kind of fed on that energy of not knowing what was going to happen. Even at the end of the case, they really didn't know how it was all going to turn out. And he said, of course, it's a soap opera, he says, and there's always drama. But really, there were so many shocking endings that it was really hard for even the cast to predict how it was going to end.
Wow, yeah, like I said, sometimes I get antsy enough just sitting through it, wanting to know how it's going to end. That's why I really like when they had, a lot of the reruns in sequence, because I know I usually don't have the patience always to watch a weekly show, because I've always wondered what's going to happen next week. So I love the rerun world, and even on those, it's still interesting. I can watch most of those reruns over and over again and not get bored with them.
Yeah, I think that, he says that's why the show will stay in longevity. He said, even 20 years from now, people will still be watching it as if it's a new series. It's a timeless classic, he said, and that's one of the reasons why he's so proud to be a part of that.
Well, I'd say he's going to have quite a bit of immortality in the acting world for sure. Now also, what kind of activities has he been keeping himself busy with over the past few years since his passing?
Mainly it's just relaxing. He said really it's anything that's important, as far as we're concerned on this earth. He said really for him it's just a spiritual retreat. He kind of needed that. He spends a lot of time with his wife and, and renewing their relationship on the other side. And he said they've been together many lifetimes, and it was kind of nice just to get back together. And, he says really everyone's work is important on the other side. But as far as, pointing out this, I'm doing that, he just kind of just chills out, takes a step back, and just lets things happen. When he was alive, he was very assertive and very worried about everything to the worst extreme sometimes. And he said now he's on the other side, he just kind of just chills out and just, sits back. And if they ask him to do something, he does it. But, he's not really active in any one particular life. It's sort of just like renewing his spirit, enjoying his time on the other side and renewing what's going to happen next.
Okay, because I know he was, considered pretty much an animal rights activist while he was alive. I was curious if maybe he still does some input in such causes like that at all.
He says really, he had some foundations that he was helping, and, some of his estate is going towards that, and he's, enjoying that. But as far as, actively involved, no. He says, for him, he did his time here on Earth, and he's pretty much done with the Earth for a while.
That's quite understandable, especially after his last 10 years. It does sound like it was definitely rough. Now, what period in his life would he say was probably the happiest time while he was here?
He says that he really enjoyed his youth. He really enjoyed his, being young and being full of energy. It was really sad for him at the end of his life to lose that, ability to do what he wanted to do when he wanted to do it. He said he was feeling really old at the end, and, that was a difficult time for him. He said his 20s were his favorite. Being 20 and being free and just having life in front of him. And he was always an adventurer. He said he always tried to, live life to the fullest. And for him, that seems to be the age that he prefers, as far as coming back here. He shows himself as, as an older man, but now as a younger man, and, is full of good looking for a guy, of his age, 20 something, and just having that carefree attitude, that New York attitude, I guess you'd call it.
So he still keeps the New Yorker in him then, definitely. Now, he had made reference to other past lives. Is there anything notable or of interest that he can recall in some of his past lives to share with us?
He's always been in the entertainment business. He said music was his passion, and most people didn't know that about him, but he was very much into music, and in past lives he was, responsible for compositions that we can hear today. He's not being specific with me as to who it might have been, but I would assume this must be someone very famous in order for us to hear that we can still hear the music. And he said this is a very long time ago for Earth years, a few hundred years ago. And so we'll have to do some more research on that and see if we can get some information on him after the show and see if he gives me an actual name of who he might have been in a past life. But he said for him that was kind of just entertainment, making people enjoy life, and that's pretty much what I'm hearing from the other side.
Wow. So yeah, it's always interesting to hear about it from the other side, because of course none of us would recollect it right now. Now he did mention he spends a lot of time with his wife, who was basically a soulmate, but they had a pretty long, notable marriage throughout their lifetime here too. What would he say were some of the probably real keys, to that successful long marriage, especially for a star?
He tried to talk to her every day. Even if he was tired or sick or just had been away, he was trying to communicate with her on a daily basis. He said, really communication is the key to a good relationship and being honest with each other. He said he never told her one lie. Even when she said, well, how do I look? He would be, cordial about it, but he would definitely give her that, that insight, because she expected it. She didn't just ask questions, She kind of didn't fish for compliments. He said she was just a straight up girl, and that's what he appreciated about her, not having to worry about, offending her or worrying about what might come next. It was kind of, for him, that was his way of, just enjoying life, just being themselves.
So I'm sure she helped carry a lot of his load then too, just by him being on an event and talk with her, which, yeah, I agree that would be very important.
I think really the next step, he says for her and him together is, the next life they come back in. He hopes they meet earlier. He says they met in their, 20s and 30s, and for him, he wished he could have met her when he was 5, and I think that says a lot about their relationship and, how he views the world and how she viewed the world. He said that, he wishes that he could have saved her from a lot of her experiences early on in life. And, for him, he was, satisfied with his childhood, but for her, it was very difficult.
Well, hopefully the next time, is he planning on returning anytime soon, the way he's talking, or?
I would imagine that, it's going to be a shorter time than most souls. We've talked about this in previous shows about every 100 years. Yeah. It looks to me like the way that they're both, re-energizing themselves, that they're ready to come back soon. And which is kind of surprising considering all of the things he went through in this life, and the fact that he's not that involved on the other side in our existence leads me to also believe that to be true. Maybe we'll see him in another 25 years or so, and maybe even in our lifetime we'll still be able to see him as an actor. He said he'll come back and he'll be an entertainer again. It's just kind of the way he works things out, maybe in a different way. He said technology is changing and things are changing, so he said that we'll be looking for him again.
Well, that's great. Now what does he see as far as any time that maybe have a better cure for like prostate cancer or anything like that? Is he seeing that coming anytime in the near future?
He says a lot of it has to do with the people. A lot of it has to do with how they take care of themselves. He said that if he would have gone to the doctor, sooner, he probably would not be in the position that he was in at the end. He said that he just ignored his health completely and just kind of just lived his life and not worrying about whether he got a cold or not. It was kind of his way of just being the man. And he said that's one of the regrets that he has, is that he didn't follow through with all of the medical checkups and all the things that were necessary to maintain one's health. He said that, once he lost his health, it was difficult for him to get it back. And he wishes that he would have done more of his preventative maintenance, he calls it, to make things happen in the right way.
So that would be, I guess, his main advice for people in general. But what about once they're already diagnosed with cancer? I mean, of course, a positive attitude is definitely going to help. But is there any other source of treatment that people might look into if they're having something similar that they're going through?
He says that for him, he had all the money in the world at that point, and he was able to, use that as an influence. But he says that for the average person right now, once they're diagnosed with prostate cancer, really there's just counting on God. He doesn't give me any specific treatments that are better than other treatments. He says, the main thing is to listen to your doctor, and he keeps going back to preventative. He keeps saying it that way. And so I would assume that must be the answer.
Absolutely, and it does make sense. Now, is there any other message he would maybe have for us that are here, still here?
He says make sure to laugh every day. I mean, for him, laughter was the best medicine. And he said everybody was so serious when he was diagnosed that it was really a part of, the wellness was to laugh. And he always tried to make jokes, and once he started breaking the ice with people, they kind of just, realized that he was just the same old Jerry, and it was time to just allow him to, to be himself. And he said that was one of the things he appreciated about his friends was they, at first everyone's standoffish, but then they realized that nothing's changed, and he was still the same jokester and pulling the practical jokes. He said that's one of the things he's famous for, and, everybody thought he was so serious, and for him to joke, it was kind of like, is he joking? Is he serious? Is he joking? And it's kind of like keeping them on their toes and second guessing was something that he enjoyed the most.
That's funny because that did come through on the show because he, you could tell you had this serious portrayal, but a lot of times you would see a little bit of a dry sense of humor come through even in his character on the show, which I always enjoyed.
I did too. I really appreciate him coming in through for us this evening and sharing with us some of the insights of, not only the Law and Order but his life. I think I learned a lot from just sitting with him this short time, who he truly was as a person, and great guy. And I'm sorry that he's on the other side and not here with us still entertaining us, but as he said at the top of this interview that this show is going to go on forever and we'll always have a part of him. And the connection to Patrick Swayze, he mentions him at the close of this interview. He said that they stay very close. They were very, very close during the film. He said that Patrick was like a son to him at one point, and they not really known to the public, but they communicated quite frequently even after all those years. They still had that close connection, and passing for him was kind of bittersweet, the way it all came down. And he said that was kind of reuniting with his son as well as a wife. So very, very, very sad.
Well, he still does have, two sons that were left behind as well as some grandchildren. I would imagine he probably does visit and check in on them from time to time. Would there be anyone else as well that he still at least comes over and sees?
Really, for him, he still appears on the Law and Order set quite frequently. Messes around with lighting and stuff to mess with the people, and so for him, that's kind of enjoyable to watch him go, "Oh, Jerry, leave it alone." And so they know it's him. He says that he does things to make them recognize him quite often. He said that he loves to disrupt the filming because he knows it pisses off the director and it just makes him laugh on the other side. And so that's something he said that on numerous occasions the film's been erased that they've has shot, and he said that's him. So I don't really think this is a haunting of the Law and Order set, but I think that really for him, he says that how many more are they going to make? That was always the joke. He said they've really taken this too far, and something of a joke there. But he's kind of laughing to himself because he said at one point, there were so many of them he couldn't even keep track of them, and there's no many enough hours in the day to watch all the episodes. And for him that was kind of funny to see how they branched off from one into all the others, and he said they just kept going and going and going and going. And so for him that was enjoyable for sure.
It actually does sound like fun, though. The problem is I saw kind of a look in your eye, Rob, so don't be getting ideas if you do cross over, okay?
Absolutely. So, I think that Jerry is going to go back to the other side now, and so we want to thank him for coming on the show this evening and sharing with us. And it's always my pleasure when I get to speak to the stars as well as the individuals who've crossed over. It's a very rewarding experience and something that I personally find enjoyable. So I really thank Jerry for coming on the show this evening, and I know that you want to thank him as well.
Yes, it's been great having him on. Even though I couldn't see him, you can definitely kind of feel a calm presence. So I'll see him, I guess, in another rerun of Law and Order.
Absolutely. Keep watching, he says. Keep watching. He says you should have Netflix. And I'm laughing about that because it's a joke between Patrick and I. And Pat really doesn't have regular TV. He just has his Netflix being out there in the backwoods and being the survivalist that he is. And, so that's kind of funny. I wonder what that means. I guess we'll have to go back and look in the archives and see what's available to us and see what the message is.
Yeah, definitely. I am curious. I got Hulu also, but yeah, Netflix, I found I really haven't needed much other television other than that. So, we'll have to go do some combing later next time you come over and see what we find on Netflix. Maybe Jerry's telling us something there, because he was definitely coming through when I was doing research. He kept popping up too many times on unrelated topics, so I figured that was a sign.
Well, As always, you always prepare these questions prior to coming together, and I do appreciate that fact that, I never know what you're going to ask, and I kind of feel like I'm on the spot and I'm being interviewed sometimes, and then I just listen and I just give the message as it comes, so I never really truly worry. I'm always surprised by the answers, and that kind of makes it enjoyable for me to have that ability to tap in and find out things that I wanted to know as well, and we never really collaborate on what you're going to ask. I mean, sometimes you'll tell me, a few things, but I'm like, no, wait, save it for the show.
That's right. Well, I'm always amazed at the answers, because how you sometimes, even since I wrote the questions, I'll have kind of maybe a preconceived expected answer or something, because I'll do some over research, and then I'll get answers that are just totally different than what I was anticipating. So it's pretty wild.
That's why I'm the psych, and you're the filling co-host at the moment, and so that's my job. And I know that sometimes people ask, well, how do you come up with the questions? And I think really you get asked the questions. You get told to ask which questions at the right time, and I'm told the right answers, so it kind of just works all in a spiritual way.
Yeah, it is odd, especially the more I've been doing these questions. Even though we have a generalized template of questions of interest, a lot of times something will just come to me to change something, or it becomes something real specific about whoever it is, or I'll go digging further. I mean, we've had it happen even with, I remember with Farrah Fawcett and with Tom Bosley, we were kind of both confused by that one, and then sure enough, I start looking and we found there was a connection, so yeah, it is very fascinating. I've been enjoying these. We'll have to maybe we'll start doing them 5 days a week. What do you think?
I don't know. It feels like we are. No, I'm just kidding. But as far as our connections, I think that's an important lesson for you to learn is that you just got to take the message and just accept it. And I think sometimes we have our own ideas about things, and we ask well, how did that fit, or how does that fit? And if I did that, I would be crazy at the end of the day. So I just give it as I get it, and I think that's important for people to know that it's not something that I try to think about in my head. I just say it, and I've come to the point now. I've been doing this so long that if I don't say it, then I regret it, because then I make a mistake. If I just say it, even if it sounds wrong, I just say it anyway, because it's what the message is, and who am I to judge? Who am I to filter? Sometimes I will filter certain things from people, just because I know it's going to be more devastating for them to hear. I don't ever tell a lie, but there's always a way of telling something in a nice way, and I always strive to do that no matter who I'm talking to. I try to think of myself as their best friend and go from there.
Well, I think it was also a very good point, because I think everybody tends to second guess things, and I've always heard that usually a lot of times go with your gut, or your first impression is usually what counts, and I found it to be very true. It seems like sometimes when we try and process it or analyze it too much, we can totally mess up the message, or really do the opposite of what would probably be the good idea.
Absolutely, I agree with you on that one. I just like I said, I just give it, and I just don't worry about it, and whatever comes about comes about. And we always have our own worldview of reviewing things, and I think that's why it's important to consult many different people on opinions about things, because my worldview may be different than yours, and different than my friend, and different than the other person, and so I think that's a very important point to make, for sure.
Absolutely. Well, once again, we want to thank Jerry Orbach for being on here, and we'll be back in just a little bit.